Hey guys, in today's video, we are going to give you 20 important things to consider when you are new to RVing. So before we jump right in, go ahead and grab a notebook because we're going to cover quite a few things that will be helpful.
Also, at the end of this video, leave in the comments section which tips you found to be the most helpful. We'd love to know your thoughts. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Tip number one is know your camping style. Henry is more of an outdoorsy person where I am more of a glamper. Before you start camping, have an idea of what kind of campgrounds you would like to visit. Do you prefer a more primitive style of camping, or would you prefer a campground that has more amenities like pools and tennis courts and things like that? Having an idea of what you're looking for will make your experience much more enjoyable.
Tip number two. Don't expect not to have issues just because your rig is new. We have met several campers with brand new RVs that have way more issues than an our used 3-year-old Lance 2185. So please, when you first start your RV search, which is going to be very exciting and they're all going to look very similar, please do your research because all brands are not created equal.
Tip number three. Guys, this one is really important. If you don't write anything else down today, write this one down. Know your weights. This is super duper important. Now this goes for people who are towing with cars, SUVs, or pickup trucks. Know your tow capacity. One thing to keep in mind is that when you are searching for a new RV, the RV sales people, actually most of them, maybe some of them will help you, but most of them are not in the business to help you figure out your tow capacity. This is actually your responsibility. Likewise, if you're in the search for a new tow vehicle like we were, do not rely on the salespeople at the dealerships to give you accurate numbers. Do your research, go to forums, and figure out the exact payload for your specific model.
Especially if you're towing with a half-ton truck, because they have so many different packages and they pretty much all have very different payloads. So please do your research. Tip number four. So if you can swing it, do your research and upgrade to a good quality hitch. We are pretty much guilty of this. When we first bought our RV, we kind of went cheap on the hitch because we wanted to save some money, right? And we were none the wiser that that was a bad idea, okay? We've had plenty of embarrassing moments. Our hitch is extremely loud when it rains. It'll save you a lot of embarrassment.
Trust me. Tip number five, practice backing up. Now, the day that we left the dealership, we left and we went straight to an abandoned parking lot, and Henry practiced parking the travel trailer. It was an amazing experience because we didn't have the added pressure of having people stare at us for the very first time that we parked the trailer. I mean, What do you think?
That really helped because especially if you go to a campsite with small sites, people are pretty close to you and many of them will be out there having a beer analyzing your backing up skills. So we really recommend that you find your nearest mall, because they're all pretty much empty these days because of COVID, right? And try to get comfortable backing up.
And just to add one more thing to that, yeah, people will be staring at you when you are parking and things like that, but our experience has been that most campers are super helpful. So don't get freaked out and too worked up over your first time actually going to a campground. There are going to be so many people there willing to help you.
Tip number six, pre-plan your routes. With RVing gaining more popularity, you're going to have a harder time finding campgrounds that you desire to go to, especially the really popular ones. If you think you're gonna pick up a last minute spot, it's gonna be very difficult. Even if you have a Harvest Host membership, which is a dry camping option.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, even on our last trip where we tried to book a Harvest Host at the last minute thinking, of course we'd be able to get in a Harvest Host, right? Nope, called, not available. So you don't wanna wing it, guys. Number 7 is going to be food prep. When we think food prep, we think chopping up food, putting it in containers. Yeah, you wanna do that, but you also wanna consider getting a big bin. How many gallons are those bins that we use?
Like 40? I don't remember.
Yeah, like the big tubs with, you know, the rubber lid. You wanna think about getting one of those and stocking it with everything that you might need on each trip. So in our bin, we have spices, we have olive oil, vinegar, pasta, rice, canned goods, and we keep them in the bin. And we just pick up the bin and we put it in the trailer. What we found is that in most of our trips in the beginning, I would always forget certain food items. So when we moved to the bin method, we didn't run into that issue anymore.
And not only that, we were able to get up and get out of the house quicker.
Much faster.
Yeah.
Now, it is okay to keep some of these items in your rig if it's not too hot outside. You don't obviously want to leave perishable items in your rig. So canned goods and things like that are fine, but the rest of the items, just throw them in your bin and keep them in the house. Tip number 8 is going to be the RV garment. Now, the RV garment is something that we probably should have bought prior to even our first trip. I mean, this thing will really save you from getting into some pretty dangerous situations. What's really cool about it is that you can customize it according to your rig. You would put in the height of your rig, the length of the rig, and the weight of the rig. And this will prevent you from going under bridges that are too low or traveling, like in our situation, over an area where there could have been grounding. We'll link that video here.
Or bridges that your rig is too heavy for.
We found our RV garment on Amazon and we'll link that in the description box below.
Tip number 9. Train your crew, guys. Especially if you're a newbie, it's very stressful. All the things you have to learn and when you're setting up for the first time. So utilize your spouse or your kids if you have them. It'll make your life so much less stressful if you give them all assigned tasks. Word to the wise. Tip number 10. Always check your tire pressure, guys. Nobody wants to be stuck on the side of the highway or in a rural location and having to deal with a flat tire. Always check before each trip. And if you're feeling fancy, you can get one of those nice TPMS systems that pretty much tells you the pressure in your tires at all times.
So we don't actually have one of the tire pressure monitoring systems. Henry just uses the air compressor to check the tires before each trip. So it's not a necessity, but it is a luxury that's worth having.
Definitely. Tip number 11. This is another important one. Check the torque of your lug nuts and your weight distribution bar connection points. This will obviously keep you safe and prevent sway.
Now, this is something that was actually not taught to us when we did our walkthrough when we purchased our travel trailer.
There's a lot of things they didn't tell us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we learned this off of a forum. And sure enough, when you go back and read through your manual, it clearly states that you should be doing this. So definitely check your manuals when you purchase and see how to keep up with that maintenance.
Tip number 12. Before you back in or park into your campsite, make sure to remove your weight distribution bars in a level area nearby. This will make your life so much easier when you're disconnecting. If your truck has a feature on the dash to tell you if the area is level or not, make sure to utilize that feature. That tip was taught to me by a fellow friendly camper named Robert. Thanks again if you're watching.
Tip number 13 is slide clearance. When you are parking your travel trailer, before you are completely set up, make sure that your slide actually has enough space to come out and therefore will not hit a tree or a pole or anything around you. You'll also want to take note of how close you are to your hookups. Will your hoses be able to reach? You want to keep all of these things in mind before you go through the hassle of setting everything up only to find out that you can't reach something or that your slide is not going to extend fully.
Tip number 14. When you're leveling, make sure you start from side to side and then from front to back. Initially, I spent a bunch of money on one of those electronic leveling systems, which I have had a hard time getting accurate readings. So I pretty much gave up on that and started using a standard little
old school
1 foot leveling tool that you can get from Home Depot for about $3 to $5. That's pretty much all you need, guys. You don't need to spend a whole bunch of money on these fancy systems.
Also, a few more tips with regard to leveling. Do not put your slide out until you are done leveling. By putting your slide out before you're actually level, you can do major damage to the internal mechanisms on the track. So keep that in mind. Level and then slides out.
It really would not make much of a difference, guys, because I've tried it both ways.
And lastly, if your trailer is not level, your refrigerator may not work. So that's just something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, you don't want your food going bad, guys.
Number 15 is to be familiar with the hookups at the campsites. It's very easy to book a campsite, with the wrong type of hookups. What do I mean? You might think you have electric and then you get there and all you have is water. When you book your camping trips, if you want full hookups, make sure that it includes sewer, electric, and water. Otherwise, you're gonna have to use other resources.
This is especially true when you're doing state parks because they are not all created equal. Tip number 16, black tanks. There are many RVs out there that already come with a black tank flush. But even though, I would still recommend that you get one of those black and gray tank flush adapters. Because believe it or not, even though your travel trailer may have a black tank flush, you may have to flush your gray tank occasionally as well.
Yeah, and the reason this is important is because even though your gray tank may be empty, what you'll find is that a lot of times when you go to that control panel, it'll still show full. And the reason that this happens is because there could be soap scum or something else that has built up on those sensors. By having that adapter, you can flush the gray tank and get all of that stuff out.
And trust me, you're gonna want an accurate reading on that gray tank because that's gonna be pretty much the first tank to fill up.
Which brings us to tip number 17, which is knowing your gray tanks. Know the size of your gray tanks. Get familiar with your gray tanks. Let me tell you, I would say that was the hardest thing for me personally. I don't know about you, but as a newbie camper, I wasn't really aware of how much water I wasted. So if you are camping, you may not want to shower every day. You may not want to wash your face as much as you would at home. And I know this all sounds really disgusting, but you can use baby wipes to clean yourself. You can utilize the outdoor shower to rinse things off or wash up your pet and things like that. You want to minimize using your gray tank, especially if you don't have a full hookup with that sewer attachment. Because if you don't have a sewer hookup, that means you're gonna have to reconnect and drive to the dumping station just to dump your gray tank. And that is not cool.
Or you could spend some more money and buy one of those additional tanks.
The honey pots.
Yeah. Tip number 18. For those of you out there who like camping in cold weather, be aware of the humidity levels inside your camper. The first time we went camping in cold weather, we woke up to about a pool of water on the edges of our windows. And that can cause major problems, guys. So please be mindful of that.
If you'd like to know more about how to monitor your humidity levels in your camper, let us know in the comments section and we'll shoot another video.
Tip number 19, bike hitches. Many campers out there love taking their bicycles to campgrounds and take advantage of those nice trails and things of that nature. But before you do that, make sure that you do not have a cosmetic bumper. We have actually been victims of this issue. We attached a bike hitch without even consulting the manufacturer, and our welds on the bumper started to crack.
This is one of those things as a newbie, you just kind of assume that a bumper can hold a bike hitch. I mean, in my mind, I see cars with bike hitches attached, so why wouldn't our RV be able to accommodate a bike hitch? But that's one of those things that you don't know until you get in there and you try it. I guess what we should have said at the beginning is read your manual.
Right, pretty much. But the manual doesn't have it all either.
That's true.
Sometimes you gotta contact the manufacturer or dig through manufacturer forums.
Yeah, manufacturer forums are huge. We had to do that with our pickup truck, actually.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so if you're still here, you have made it to tip number 20, which is park rules. Now, this goes for state parks, national parks, private campgrounds. You want to follow the rules that are given to you at these parks. The parks are gonna have things in place like quiet hours, rules regarding drone usage. Yeah, Henry's always disappointed when he can't fly his drone. Whether or not you're allowed to drink alcohol. Believe it or not, there are some federal parks and things like that we've gone to and it's not allowed. And then also your check-in and check-out times. You want to honor all of these things because the last thing you want to do is get banned from going back to one of these campgrounds. That could really suck.
So don't just ball up those rules and throw them in the trash can because the rules at many of these parks are very different. So read those rules.
Read the rules, guys. If you have never camped before, this probably was information overload, but don't let that discourage you. Camping is so much fun. You will pick it up over time. This is just a list to get you started.
You can always watch this video over and over again.
Yeah. So having said that, save this video and subscribe because we're gonna have more helpful content coming your way.
And on that note,
we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.